Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons, and love are told. If you enjoy stories that make your heart race and your mind spin with possibilities, you're in the right place. Stick with me till the end. And don't forget to like, share with your friends, and subscribe so you never miss a moment. It had been one of those days where my phone wouldn't stop ringing, my inbox was bursting, and my calendar was stacked back to back with meetings. As the founder and CEO of a multi-million-dollar tech firm, chaos came with the territory. Still, nothing could have prepared me for what happened when I stepped into my car that evening. My driver had pulled up in front of the glass building, where my name was etched in gold letters, and as I slid into the back seat, I nearly dropped my briefcase. Sitting there, small legs dangling off the leather seat, was a little girl. Her dark eyes locked on mine with an intensity that made my breath hitch. Before I could say a word, she leaned forward, frowned, and said in a low, steady voice, "Shut up and listen to me." I stared at her, confused, glancing toward the driver for an explanation. But he kept his eyes forward, gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. I thought maybe she was lost, or her parents were nearby, but then she said something that made every nerve in my body jolt awake. "They're going to take everything from you tonight." Her voice didn't tremble, it was matter of fact, as if she were telling me the time. "Who?" I asked, trying to sound calm. She didn't hesitate. "The man you call your brother in business, and the woman who smiles at you every morning." My chest tightened instantly. She couldn't possibly be talking about Adrian Cole, my partner for 15 years, and Lydia Harper, my executive assistant who had been with me almost a decade. I leaned back, my mind spinning. "How do you know them?" I asked carefully. She tilted her head like she was studying me. "I know things. And I know they've been moving money that doesn't belong to them. You trust them, but they're laughing at you. Tonight, they're making their move to take your company." Her words landed like bricks. I wanted to dismiss it, but something in her steady gaze told me she wasn't guessing. She was certain. Her name, I soon learned, was Aaliyah, 7 years old. No parents she was willing to talk about. She said she'd been around when Adrian and Lydia talked in places they thought were private. The details: she gave the name of the fake holding company, the exact time of a secret meeting, the code phrases they used were things only an insider could know. My stomach sank. Either this was an elaborate trick, or my world was about to fall. Apart, I tried to keep my voice steady. "Why are you telling me this?" She crossed her arms. "Because good people don't see bad people coming. You look like you don't see them." That stung. I prided myself on reading people, on building a company from nothing with the right alliances. If Adrian and Lydia were plotting against me, that meant I'd been blind. The rest of the ride was a blur of her rapid-fire warnings and my attempts to piece together what I was hearing. She described documents being signed without my approval, millions being siphoned through fake clients, and a merger deal that would leave me with nothing. And she said it all with a calm certainty that belied her age. When the car pulled up to my penthouse, she didn't ask to come in. Didn't look like she expected anything. She just stood on the curb, her small figure framed by the city lights. "You have hours," she said simply, "before it's too late." And then she turned and walked away into the evening crowd, as if she hadn't just detonated a bomb in my life. That I stood there for a long moment, briefcase still in my hand. The sound of traffic rushing past. Everything in me wanted to call Adrian and demand answers, but instinct told me to wait. If what Aaliyah said was true, confronting them now would only make them cover their tracks faster. I needed proof, and I needed it before midnight. That night, as I sat in my home office with the city skyline beyond the glass, I replayed every interaction I'd had with Adrian and Lydia over the past year. The missed calls, the closed-door meetings I wasn't invited to, the sudden insistence on pushing through a merger deal that felt oddly rushed. I'd brushed off my unease because they'd been with me so long. But Aaliyah's words had cracked something open, and now all I could see were the patterns I'd ignored. That I pulled out a notebook and began jotting down every lead she had given me. Names, dates, places, bank accounts. If she was wrong, I'd waste a few hours chasing shadows. If she was right, my entire life's work was in danger. And something deep in my gut told me she was right. By the time the clock struck 11, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to Adrian or Lydia with accusations. I was going to someone who could help me verify the truth without tipping them off. Someone who knew how to dig quietly. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years. but whose skill at uncovering buried secrets was unmatched, that I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used since the days when my company was still in its fragile infancy. When a gravelly voice answered on the second ring, I said only 2 words, "I need you." Gabriel Shaw's voice hadn't changed in the 5 years since we last spoke, still sharp, deliberate, and edged with the quiet authority of a man who'd seen too much. Back when my company was a startup running on caffeine and hope, Gabriel had been my go-to for background checks and quiet damage control. He'd retired from the investigative grind. At least that's what he claimed, but when I told him a child had just walked into my car and warned me about a betrayal worth hundreds of millions, he didn't hesitate. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, he said, hanging up before I could thank him. When he arrived at my penthouse, he didn't waste time with pleasantries. Gabriel was a tall, weathered man with silver hair and the kind of stare that could strip a person down to the truth. "Tell me everything," he said, settling into the chair opposite me. I gave him every detail Aaliyah had shared with the shell companies, the whispered plans, the timing. He scribbled notes, only pausing to ask pointed questions about Adrian and Lydia's access to finances, their recent travel, and who else might be in on it. 7 years old, and she knew all that? He muttered, half to himself. Either she's been eavesdropping in the right places, or she's got someone feeding her information. "Do you think she could be lying?" I asked, trying not to let my desperation show. Gabriel shook his head slowly. "People lie. Kids that age? Not with that kind of precision. If she's telling the truth, your people have been setting you up for a while. This isn't something they decided last week." The next day, Gabriel started digging. He didn't work out of offices or use assistants. His investigations happened in quiet corners and unremarkable cafes, on encrypted laptops and burner phones. While he worked, I kept my routine exactly the same, smiling at Lydia as she handed me my morning schedule, shaking Adrian's hand before meetings, pretending not to notice the sidelong glances they exchanged. It was a performance, and I had to sell at point. 3 days into the investigation, Gabriel sent me a secure file. Inside were bank records that made my stomach turn. Transfers in the millions, funneled through a maze of accounts before landing in a firm registered in the Cayman Islands. The name on the registration, Helix Meridian Holdings. I'd never heard of it before Aaliyah mentioned it. Yet here it was, real and thriving off money that should have been in my company's reserves. Worse still, Gabriel had traced communications between Adrian and a rival CEO, someone we'd beaten out for a major contract last year. Those encrypted messages laid out a blueprint for the so-called merger Aaliyah warned me about. If the deal went through, I'd be left with a ceremonial position while they gutted the business and sold off the assets. One night, Gabriel and I met in the back room of a small Ethiopian restaurant far from downtown. He slid a voice recorder across the table. "You'll want to hear this." The file was barely 5 minutes long, but it was enough to make my hands clench. Adrian's voice was unmistakable, boasting about how the old man trusted them too much to suspect anything, and how Lydia could get him to sign anything if it was presented the right way. I wanted to throw the recorder against the wall, but Gabriel's hand on my wrist stopped me. "Not yet," he said. "We don't have enough to bury them legally. This is good, but we need more contracts, falsified reports, and a witness who can testify to their intent." A witness. The thought hit me like a jolt. Aaliyah. I hadn't seen her since that night, but I knew how to find her. She'd left me with a location in Eastbrook where she spent her afternoons. When I arrived, she was perched on a swing, kicking at the dirt. She didn't look surprised to see me. "Did you check?" she asked before I could say anything. "Yes," I said quietly. "You were right." She shrugged like it didn't matter, but I could see the flicker of pride in her eyes. I sat down on the swing next to her, the chains creaking. "Aaliyah, I need your help. I need you to tell someone what you told me exactly the way you said it." Her legs stilled, and she gave me a long look. "Will it stop them?" "Yes," I said, and I meant it. That night, Gabriel met with her. I didn't know exactly what they talked about, but when he called me later, his voice was calm. "She's willing to testify, but she's scared. You're going to have to keep her close." So I did. I brought her to my home, set her up in a guest room, and made sure she was safe. Lydia gave me a strange look when she saw the child's small hand in mine one morning at the office, but I brushed it off as a family matter. Every day, That past was another day of collecting evidence of false invoices signed by Lydia, board meeting notes altered to remove my objections, private emails detailing the day they planned to push the merger vote through. The trap was forming in my mind, piece by piece. Gabriel would handle the legal side, securing warrants for a raid timed to coincide with the vote. Aaliyah's testimony would corroborate the financial and audio evidence. All I had to do was act normal until the day came. But normal was harder than I thought. Sitting across from Adrian in a strategy meeting, hearing him pitch new opportunities. In a voice that used to inspire my trust, I felt a simmering anger that was hard to contain. Watching Lydia pass me documents with her perfectly rehearsed smile made me want to ask her why, after all these years, she'd decided to stab me in the back. Instead, I smiled. I signed where I had to. I waited. The night before the board meeting, Gabriel came to the penthouse with the final confirmation. The police were on standby. The financial crimes unit had everything they needed. The only thing left was to spring the trap.as. I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. Aaliyah padded into the room in her socks. "Are you going to win?" she asked softly. That I turned to face her, and for the first time in weeks, I let the anger drain away. "We're going to do more than win," I said. "We're going to make sure they can never hurt anyone again." The boardroom was buzzing that morning, the polished mahogany table surrounded by men and women in tailored suits, their expressions carefully neutral. At the head of the table sat Adrian, with Lydia to his right, her pen poised over a notepad. I took my usual seat opposite them, my own expression carved into polite detachment. Only Gabriel and Aaliyah, seated quietly in a corner with a book, knew what was about to happen. Adrian opened the meeting with his usual charm, speaking about visionary growth and a transformative partnership that would secure our legacy. For decades, the merger contract sat in a thick folder before me, the company's fate wrapped in neat legal language. Every eye in the room flicked toward me as he finished his speech. "We're ready for your signature, Samuel," he said, his voice smooth as glass. That I glanced at Lydia, who gave me an encouraging smile as she slid the final page toward me. My pen hovered just above the line, and then I looked up at Adrian. "You know," I said, voice calm, "something's been bothering me about this deal. I think we should clear up a few things before I sign." He frowned, the first crack in his composure. "Everything's in order. We've been through this a dozen times." "Yes," I said, flipping the contract closed. "But the problem is, you've also been through this." I slid a small voice recorder across the table with our competitor while planning to gut the company. For a moment, silence held the room. Then Adrian laughed, too loudly. "What? Is this a joke?" I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of my next words settle. "No joke. I have your voice on tape, bank transfers to Helix Meridian Holdings, and falsified invoices. And I have a witness." That was Aaliyah's cue. She closed her book, stood up, and walked to my side. She looked impossibly small next to the long table, but her voice carried clearly. "I heard you. Both of you. You said he wouldn't see it coming." Lydia's face drained of color, her hand trembling as she set down her pen. Adrian's jaw tightened, his gaze darting toward the door. But before he could move, the boardroom door swung open. Two plainclothes officers stepped inside, followed by a woman in a navy blazer from the Financial Crimes Unit. "Adrian Cole, Lydia Harper," she announced. "You are under arrest for corporate fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering." The next few minutes played out in slow motion. Adrian sputtered protests. Lydia cried quietly as they were read. Their rights. Cameras flashed as they were let out. The media already tipped off to the scandal. Around the table, board members shifted uncomfortably, none willing to meet my eyes. Once the room emptied, Gabriel walked in, his usual stoic expression softened by a flicker of satisfaction. "It's done," he said simply. I nodded, my gaze drifting to Aaliyah. She was watching me, her face unreadable. Later that week, after the dust began to settle, I invited her to sit with me in the quiet of my office. "You could have walked away that night," I said. "Why didn't you?" She shrugged, eyes fixed on the skyline. "Because you didn't look like someone who deserved it. And I think my mom would have wanted me to help you." Her words stirred something deep in me. "Your mom?" She nodded. "She was my mom. And she was your sister." I froze, my mind scrambling to process the words. My sister had died years ago, or so I'd been told. She'd left home before. I built my company, cut ties with the family. The idea that this child in front of me was her daughter. It explained everything. The instinctive pull I'd felt toward her, her fierce determination to protect me. How long have you known? I asked softly. A while, she said. But I didn't think you'd believe me if I told you first. I reached for her hand, the weight of all the years we'd lost pressing down on me. You have a home now, I told her. For as long as you wanted. Over the following months, the company recovered. Investors who had been shaken by the scandal returned once they saw we'd purged every trace of the fraud. Adrian and Lydia's trial made headlines, and their convictions sent a clear message about betrayal in high places. But the real change happened outside the boardroom. I started a scholarship program in Aaliyah's name, funding education for children from unstable backgrounds. I wanted kids like her kids who saw too much too soon to have a chance to build a future without having to fight alone. She became the honorary ambassador, speaking at events with a confidence that belied her age. Watching her talk to rooms full of strangers, I saw a strength I knew came from her mother. One evening, as we walked home from a gala, she looked up at me. Do you think they're sorry? She asked. That I considered it. Maybe. But that's not what matters. What matters is that we're building something better now. She smiled faintly, and for the first time since all this began, I felt a sense of peace. The betrayal had been deep, the fight brutal, but in the end, it had given me something I hadn't even known I was missing. A family, a legacy worth more than money. So if you're watching this and you've been betrayed, remember this. The people who try to break you can't define you. Sometimes, the worst thing that happens becomes the best thing that ever could. And guys, if this story moved you, make sure you hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you took away from this. Moral lesson: betrayal is a bitter wound, but it can also be a powerful turning point. In my case, it wasn't just about losing trust in people I had once called family. It was about realizing that vigilance is as important as kindness. Sometimes, the people closest to you will be the ones plotting your downfall, and you won't see it coming until someone brave enough speaks up. That someone, for me, was a little girl who not only saved my company, but also redefined my idea. A family that if you've been hurt or blindsided, understand that you have the power to respond with more than anger. You can use the pain as fuel to build something stronger, to protect others from the same harm, and to turn your story into a warning and a beacon. Life will always have its share of Adrian and Lydia figures, but it will also bring unexpected allies like Aaliyah. And when you meet them, listen. They might just be the key to your greatest victory. In the end, revenge may win you a moment, but rebuilding with integrity will win you a lifetime. Trust wisely, act decisively, and never ignore the quiet voice that says, "Look closer."